Welcome, everyone. I'm Beth Jones, the Director of Christian Legal Aid, and today we're talking about a daunting topic, fundraising. What comes to mind when you hear the word fundraising? If you're like me, you're probably thinking challenging, awkward, but critical. You're not alone. Our guest speaker today, Karen Marchant, is passionate about helping ministries maximize their missions through building financial and organizational capacity. Karen is the owner of Capacity Strategies LLC and has over 20 years of senior and executive nonprofit leadership and fund development experience. More recently, Karen joined our volunteer Christian Legal Aid Advisory Council. Karen has been married to Jeff for 43 years and is a mom to 4 amazing grown kids. We're very blessed to have her expertise here today. Karen, thank you for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I'm super excited to be here because I learned about Christian legal aid from my days at High Ministries, and I've been in love with it forever. And so I'm super, super excited to be here today. Like, really excited because I love the work that you're doing. Um, I think it's critical, and I actually really like fundraising. I really, really enjoy it because I love people. And I think it's fun to inspire people to give and then watch them experience the joy of making the world a better place. So today, the information I'm going to share with you will be great if you're just starting up, or if you're a clinic that just wants to increase your financial capacity to grow your programs. I think, and I hope and I pray this information will help. And I did create a bunch of handouts for y'all. And if any of you are hearing this and you want to have a conversation with me, just reach out to Beth because she can connect me to you and give you my cell number and all that. So let's see if we can get to this first slide. Okay. Today, I'm going to give you a roadmap. And like I said, whether you're at the beginning of this journey or you're a bit further down the road, what we talk about today is going to get you to your destination, which is financial sustainability. Do you not love those two words, financial sustainability? I love those. First, we're going to discuss what you need to put in place at an organizational level to raise money. Second, how to build a dynamic board and why this is so important. Third, how to get the word out about your clinic. And finally, where to look for possible sources of funding, including grants. But before we get started, I want you to do a check-in with yourself, thinking about what Beth just said when she introduced us. How do you feel about raising money? Does it like scare you? Do you get super excited about it? Or are you like the whole topic is just so incredibly boring, you're not even sure you can get through this webinar? Well, I just want you to know whatever you're feeling is okay. Fundraising really truly can be super rewarding. Why is that? Well, because it's all about people, the people you serve, the people who have money to give, your volunteers. And it's about bringing together all these people within the love of Christ as expressed through your mission. And it's about communicating vision in a way that inspires. And I know that all of you can inspire because you're so passionate about the people you serve. And here's the most important thing for you to remember right now if you're one of the people that feels like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous about this. If you are super uncomfortable asking people for money, think about this. Most of the time, you don't even have to ask people for a certain gift amount. That is such good news. In fact, I think it's better fundraising to not ask for a certain gift amount. Do you remember what it was like asking your parents for money when you were a kid? To me, that was terrifying. I hated it. But fundraising is different because you're inviting them to be a part of your mission. And research tells us that most people absolutely love to give. Our job is to share the vision, present our donor with a menu of investment opportunities that ties their gift to impact. And then we let them decide. They can have a conversation with God and then they can tell us what they would like to give. See, that takes all the pressure off and it leaves just the fun part for us, which is sharing vision and watching them getting excited about giving. Here's what I know to be true, and I want you to own these truths. All things are possible with God. So invite him into your fundraising. There is more than enough money out there for every nonprofit. So we can fundraise from the perspective of abundance. We don't have to compete with other organizations for donor dollars. Donor dollars. And number three, funding follows vision. You have a compelling vision. So communicate vision to everyone, everywhere, all the time. And finally, people give to people and people give to organizations that they trust. So I really want you to think about those, meditate on them, internalize them, because this is part of what's going to take the stress out of fundraising for you. So let's talk about putting the basics in place. One of your handouts has a checklist of what you've got to put in place to secure startup funds or capacity building funds from foundations and major gifts. I'm going to highlight just a few of them right now, so we don't get lost in this list. But I really want you to know that today's donors and foundations are holding nonprofits to a higher standard than ever before. They are expecting to know that you have solid leadership in place, a strategic plan, a business plan, a fundraising plan, a clear definition of what success looks like, and how success is going to be measured. Now, write this down because it's not in your PowerPoint or in your outline. They also want to know that you have a sustainability and plan in place so that beyond the life of their gifts, your ministry will be able to continue. And I know this list is long and it's got a lot of big stuff on it. I just want to remind you that everything is a step-by-step thing. It doesn't have to be done in the next 48 hours. Now, I know you've registered your organization, but have you registered in your state to do charitable solicitation? Most states are now requiring that. And of course, you're going to have a board of directors. You really want to work on a good vision and mission statement and strategic priorities and make sure that you have a strategic plan that's been approved by your board. I also think that there are some times when a foundation might ask you if you have a fundraising plan and you have someone to implement it. So you want to work on that. And of course, you're going to want to have all the software you need, whether it's donor management software, accounting software. A big one is software to track and report on your clients and the outcomes and all that kind of thing. And you're going to want to work on a case for support. And here's the thing, if you will commit to doing this work from the very beginning, and if you will establish an annual rhythm of reviewing your program plans, your successes, your failures, your fundraising strategies, you are going to set yourself up for success for many years to come. At one organization that I worked for, we grew our annual budget from 1.2 million to over 3 million during the recession. Well, you know how we did that. We created a strategic plan. We created strategic priorities that tied all of our programs together and we developed objectives and outcomes. And this work may seem tedious at first, but when you get into the rhythm of it, it's actually super empowering and it communicates volumes to donors and foundations. All right, so we're going to move away from this list and we're going to talk about something super important, and that's building a dynamic board. A couple of years ago, I talked with someone that was starting a nonprofit, and we talked about this long list of stuff that you're going to read in your handout, and they were well on their way to completing the checklist. And then we got to the topic of the board. He had 6 or 7 people committing to serve on his board, but he hadn't thought through what expertise he needed. He hadn't considered what their financial capacity was for giving, And for all of you that are starting legal clinics, it might be tempting to recruit mostly attorneys to serve on your board. I totally get that. But I don't think having a board of directors comprised of all attorneys is going to serve you well. So think broader. Think about what expertise you need or what expertise you might be lacking yourself. So maybe you have someone that's, well, you'll definitely want an accountant. You might have someone on your board that has marketing experience. And you know this, but your board is responsible for your clinic legally. And their primary responsibilities are to drive strategic vision. So keep that in mind. Help you keep from mission drift, ensure compliance with all regulations and laws, and make sure you're financially stable. By the way, Board Source is a great resource for all things board related, including how to equip your board to raise money. And here's what I want you to think about and pray about. If you are a startup clinic, you need people on your board who have the means to make large gifts, or they're well connected to people or foundations who have the capacity to make large gifts. And really, this is true for all of the clinics who want to grow their financial capacity, but it is particularly true for a startup. I mean, every board needs member needs to help you raise money. So if you can recruit board members who are collectively a fundraising powerhouse, you will, from the beginning, be well on the way to ensuring your clinic's financial sustainability. And as a bonus, you can leverage your board giving to raise money from foundations and higher net worth people. Having a generous board speaks volumes. And maybe not every member of your board needs to be wealthy. Of course, you're going to have an attorney on your board, but you've got to have that board that's well-rounded in terms of expertise. Having a racially diverse board is great, and maybe even someone with the lived experience within the community you serve. Foundations are loving that right now. So I'm talking about putting together a board that has some financial muscle, especially when you're starting out. So if your board has this financial strength, you need to get your clinic going for a couple of years. Then while they're supporting your clinic, you can begin to launch fundraising efforts and secure a solid base of support. And another option is to create an advisory council in addition to your board. And the difference between an advisory council and a board is that the advisory council doesn't have legal responsibility for your clinic, and they cannot make formal decisions. They can only advise you. Your advisory council can be your success team. This is a group of people who know things that you need to know. They know people you need to know. They're excited about making sure your clinic is successful. And an advisory council is a great place for a clinic beneficiary to serve. And again, if those advisory council members can be donors, that's all the better. Now, you know this, but your board and your advisory council need oversight and dedicated time to be nurtured, but the payoff can be huge. And I've created a handout with some of the characteristics of a great board member. I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. And of course, one of them is that they're visionary thinkers, because your board really does need to lead the way in strategic thinking and strategic planning and all that kind of thing. They need to know people who know people who know people. Obviously, they're going to have an area of expertise you need. They have a sphere of influence within the community you serve and possibly beyond. And of course, they're committed to financially supporting your clinic and making a personally significant gift. That might be one amount for one member and a different amount for another member, but they're committed to giving. And of course, your board needs to lead the way in giving and be willing to help the executive director raise money. And you just have to make sure that you set those expectations up front so they don't feel blindsided. I think the topic of boards and putting together a dynamic board is literally one of the most significant things to having a successful clinic for the long term. But let's move on from that and let's talk about getting the word out. If you are a clinic that is just getting started or you're in the planning stages of starting one, you can go ahead and start getting the word out about your clinic because this is all about building a donor base, identifying advocates and strategic partners within the community, and you can go ahead and begin your storytelling. In fact, great storytelling begins with your vision and your why this vision matters, why this work matters, and why this work matters to you personally. In great storytelling, you paint a picture that just draws people in. It makes them lean in. They want to hear more. They want to know more. Your story needs an emotional hook, which is going to be your why. Why are you personally invested? Then a part of your story is describing the need or the problem and how unresolved legal issues impact the individual and their family. And then you're going to describe the solution and how your clinic is going to change lives. Storytelling, we know now through decades of research, is what activates the part of the brain that makes someone want to give. So you want to hone that story and you want to work that story, possibly even down to a 30-second story. You know, that 30-second elevator pitch? Well, many, many, many years ago, when we were trained on the 30-second elevator pitch, it was always about, you think you're on the elevator and somebody says, "What are you doing?" And you say, "Oh, I work at so and so, and we feed 300 homeless people every day." Okay, that's fine. That person's going to get off that elevator and they're not going to remember that you said you feed 300 people a day. They might remember that you said you feed homeless people every day. So that's the thing is your 30-second elevator picture story should not start with the data dump. It needs to start with your why. And numbers are so important to have at your fingertips. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But we always want to start with vision and then numbers follow at the right time. So think about this. If someone with $1 million to give you told you that you had 60 seconds to make a pitch, what would you say to hook them and inspire them to know more? And that is your story. That's your vision. That's your why. It's the activates the part of the brain that says, "I want to know more because I think I might want to give." That is great storytelling. And once you've gotten your story down, you can begin to tell your story to your family, friends, anybody that you know. It could be over email, meeting over coffee, by hosting intimate dinners or larger gatherings. If you're going to send an email, just make sure it has a killer subject line. And every communication needs to draw them into the lives of your clients and draw them into the lives of their struggles. But here's the other part of it. Draw them into your client's potential because everybody loves to solve a problem with their giving. But make all of this very personal. Tell them why it's important to you because they care about you. Your friends and family care about you. And then you could make it personal to them because people love to solve problems and champion the underserved. And it might take 5 to 7 touches before someone is ready to give, but they're going to want to give because they know you, they trust you, and because you've told them that their financial support is going to help every client reach their potential. So appeal to their personal values when you invite them to give. Ask them to spread the word for you. And honestly, people that don't know you personally are going to respond the same way. And of course, you know this, but you want to maximize social media and your website, and you want to use social media to get the word out and point them back to your website. And you can also use social media to educate them on the need. And here's this idea: establish your value and expertise. You can use social media to get people to sign up for newsletters. And of course, you're going to include links to videos, stories, quotes, and photos. Your website needs to be super easy to navigate. And on your donation page, don't make it sterile. Some nonprofit donation pages are so sterile, and I'm always reminded on those pages that are so sterile, I'm not making a transaction, I'm not buying a sweater, I'm not buying something. This is about people. So include on that donation page a photo or a quote or a 3-minute testimony so it doesn't feel transactional. And if you do that, that's going to help reinforce that person's decision to support your clinic. And as you're out networking and connecting with civic leaders and church leaders and other clinic executives, and you meet with business and professional groups, the chambers of commerce, know the city council, you're telling your story, you're sharing your plans, and you're learning from anyone who might know something or someone you need to know. Get everybody behind your clinic, and when appropriate, you can ask for connections to possible funding. In fact, there are other clinic directors that might point you to foundations or businesses that might be interested in supporting your clinic. And it's okay to do that because remember, we're not competing. We're all in this together. But let's talk about numbers now. We've talked about the vision, we've talked about the why. We know that it's storytelling that really activates that part of the brain that wants to give. But now we're going to talk about numbers because numbers are going to keep those people giving. My very favorite CFO of all time when I worked at MOPS International, Beth Flamburis, says this: numbers tell a story, and stories bring numbers to life. And that's really cool because that guy on the elevator that said, oh, yeah, we feed 300 people, homeless people a day, that's an important number because it does tell you the breadth of your ministry. It tells the breadth of how wide your impact is. So you want to know your numbers because you've got to be able to tell people, how many people you're serving. And really an important one is what percentage of your clients report feeling competent to advocate for themselves in court. Of course, another one is what is the economic impact on a family or a community if their legal needs go unmet? Like, what is the economic impact to a community? So, just before we move on, sharing vision and impact will inspire people to give. Sharing your personal why will help donors trust you. And then sharing your data and outcomes and reporting on the impact of their investment will keep them giving. All right, so let's go to one of my very favorite topics, asking for a gift. And remember, we've already said we do not have to sit down with someone and say, would you please give me a $10,000 gift today? Would you please give my clinic $10,000? You don't have to do that. And there's a very simple outline that you can always follow, whether you're meeting with somebody or you're sending out an email appeal or you're having a gathering. You hook them with the emotional story. You describe the problem. You describe the solution. You tie financial support to impact, like how the beneficiary's life will be changed, or how your reach as a clinic is going to be changed. And then you end with a clear call to action, but like not too many options. Like too many choices might shut their brains down. And that's kind of backed by research. So I've been to events where somebody gets up, they invite people to give, but then they also say, oh, we would also like you to think about becoming a monthly donor, and we would also like you to think about becoming a volunteer. You've now just given your audience too many things to think about and too many decisions to make. So when your main goal is to raise money. Make sure you end with that clear call to action, which is your gift today will impact X number of lives or whatever that is. And also, research on what fundraising strategies work best when you're sending out an appeal is the combination of a direct mail appeal with an email backup. That was even true in 2020 during the pandemic when everybody was concerned about saving money. It's still that direct mail appeal with email backup that brings in the most money. That is just fascinating to me. I will tell you, my husband's on the board of a small nonprofit that does really good work. All they do is email um, appeals and they get all the money in. They just do. And so, even though that research underscores best practice as being direct mail with email backup, God does things in different ways. And that's kind of cool about being in a relationship with God and having a faith-based ministry is God will just say, "Hey, this is coming in and I get all the glory for it and you've done great work, but this is really just me, God." And I absolutely love that. All right, this section for seeking startup funding um is also applicable for a clinic that wants to just build capacity. So think about that. If you're a clinic that just wants to grow your programming, you want to have capacity building money, this basic list applies to you as well. But it really is mostly for startup clinics. So one of the things I've noticed nonprofits kind of messing up when they're going after startup funding or even capacity building money is they start getting worried about like the cost of everything and they're like, okay, so we're not going to put money in for our website or branding or marketing materials. We're going to try to keep the costs as low as possible. Maybe we'll just have a part-time employee or whatever. Don't do that. Be really thorough. Make sure that you have all of your costs included, whether it is a registration fee or insurance or a part-time employee or a grant writer. Another big one, an important one, is making sure that you have enough money in your budget for software. And to be really honest, if you were going to a foundation and seeking startup funding and you didn't have some of this stuff included in your budget, they would be asking you questions and they would be wanting to know if you really, really know how to how to do this. So make sure you've got money in there for fundraising and a social media plan and even money in there for board development, so that you can steward well your board and your advisory council. That kind of speaks volumes too to foundations and to high net worth people that might want to give you some startup funding. And see, I have employees on this list and the donor management and other necessary software. Yep, those are all super important. And of course, as you're thinking about sources of funding, we've already talked about your family and friends, your board, your advisory council, private foundations, community foundations. They focus on geographical areas, so keep that in mind. Corporate programs. It seems like there's more corporations that are getting involved in their communities. And I'm on the board of a small nonprofit, and we've got two companies that are super excited about giving us startup funding. Well, and we're not actually starting up. We're like 2 years old, so we're kind of like a preschooler now. But they want to fund us for the next 3 years. They're very, very excited about doing that. For federal grants, super important that you have a grant writer that is very, very competent at grant writing and very, very successful. State and local grants, same thing. I think raising money from churches can be more difficult. However, in Denver, I'm finding out about more churches that are interested in the underserved, people living on the margins, and have this social justice bent. Those are the churches that are going to want to help you and support their work you're doing at the clinic. Law firms, of course. Jamlac has had a law firm sponsoring an annual fundraiser for them for years. And by the way, Jamlac, the Justice and Mercy Legal Aid Clinic that was at Mile High Ministries, was how I found out about Christian legal aid. I didn't even know Christian legal aid existed. I didn't even know why it was important. And now I'm in love with it. So, that's something else to keep in mind is I think the Christian community needs to be educated about the opportunity to empower and champion people that need legal aid for free. And then, of course, foundations that manage donor advised funds. You know, there is so much money setting in donor advised funds it almost kind of kills me because people are putting that money, they're parking that money in their donor advised fund, but they're not, and they get the tax benefit, but they haven't necessarily released it to nonprofits. So another important strategy down the road or whenever is that you begin to reach out to your major donors and just let them know, remind them that should they have a donor advised fund, you would welcome a gift from that fund. Something that happened in 2020 was really interesting. Foundation giving way increased. You know, they rallied and they started to some more support emergency relief and social and racial justice efforts. Then in 2021, it went back down. Today, foundations are focusing more on inequities and underserved communities. There you go. People of color. They now have strategic priorities around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some foundations really will accept proposals for startup funding or capacity funding, but you have to do your research and you have to determine whether or not your mission fits within their funding priorities and whether or not they will provide startup or capacity building funding. And I talked to two of my favorite program officers here in Denver, and both said that they have received a lot of LOIs and proposals that clearly do not fit within their funding priorities. And it's just a waste of their time, and they consider it a huge waste of resources on the part of the nonprofit. So we don't get to try to squeak in a request if we're not a good fit. And if you can get a 15-minute phone call meeting with a program officer who will then become your BFF, he or she can help guide you as to whether or not it's worth their time and your time to submit a request. And the thing of it is, like I said at the beginning, foundations are holding nonprofits to a higher standard than ever before. And they want to know that you have established measurable outcomes and that you really are tracking your success. And they really do want to know that you have a sustainability plan in place so that you have the systems and processes, technology, and staff in place to really make sure you deliver your programs and that you are able to raise money. And also, they seem right now to be really interested in nonprofits that have multiple income streams, that have partnerships and collabs with other nonprofits because they love us to be sharing knowledge. They love us to share our expertise and knowledge with other nonprofits. And I think that's a really cool thing. And, you know, when we've established the idea that we are not competing with other nonprofits, we're not competing with other clinics, we are communicating to donors and foundations that we've joined hands for the betterment of the community. Well, I think this is enough information for today. I mean, we've talked about a lot and I've talked pretty fast. Um, and I hope it doesn't feel overwhelming to you. I really hope that it doesn't. We've talked about putting the basics in place, building a dynamic board. Um, we've talked about how to get the word out and about storytelling. And we've talked about where to look for funding and about seeking grant funding. Um, as I said at the beginning, I've given Beth some handouts, and hopefully, my these handouts will help you. And I am offering my support today for a phone call if you like. And I just want to leave you with this encouragement. It's just a step-by-step thing. You don't have to have all this done in 48 hours. In fact, if you just know that you need to do these things, that is huge when you're talking to major donors and higher capacity donors and foundations. And then you're just working toward doing that. And I love this quote, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. That is wisdom right there. And that's where we trust God. Step by step, every day, we keep working at it and we're going to get there. Beth, do we have any questions?
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, feel free to put your questions in the chat and I will let Karen know. Karen, I am so encouraged to hear what you had to share with us. Christian Legal Society this year is putting the systems and processes in place that you're talking about to help our
Yeah.
startup succeed. So we're starting to put in place the website that tells a compelling story, the case management software that includes the ability to track giving, to track donors. It also tracks performance metrics for grants. We're putting in place the professional liability insurance grants. So much of that front end heavy lifting that can feel daunting, CLS is doing for its affiliated clinics. So I'm really excited about 2026 is going to be a great year for our startups.
Well, and I just think that's amazing because, I've worked on staff of a number of nonprofits, which has just been a total blast. And I've been connected to Christian Legal Society for a really long time. But like when I first started fundraising, foundations and major donors, they were just kind of lax about stuff, and they're not anymore. And I'm really good with that because I think like if I were running a nonprofit, Beth, I would be super excited about having all this that you've got for the clinics because that would be helping me achieve my mission and doing a really good job. And back in the day, there were faith-based nonprofits that just felt like, well, God is good. He's going to bring us the money. And so we could kind of be relaxed about stuff. And I love the idea that God is good and he's going to bring us the money because that's what he does. I feel like as a Christian, I want to do an A plus plus job. I want to achieve excellence because I believe that brings honor and glory to him.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Karen. And also thank you for being on my advisory council. I really value your opinions and feedback. And thank you to the participants. Please email me if you have any questions about starting a Christian legal aid or just want to connect with Karen or ask any other questions. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with the final thought of what I got from this presentation, and that is that fundraising is really about connecting people to a mission that they care about, and that's Christian legal aid. Not everyone's an attorney, and not all attorneys have the time or capacity to volunteer, but everyone can join the mission through fundraising. So it's really about providing that opportunity to join us, which is not so scary as I felt at the beginning of this. So I'll close this in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity to learn how to effectively spread the mission that you've given us. Our mission is to serve vulnerable populations with our legal skills, with the love of Christ. Thank you for Karen and her time today and for all the participants. I pray that you'll put it on more and more Christian attorneys' hearts to start up a Christian legal aid in their community. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.